The Roman aqueduct of Pont du Gard is one of the greatest sights in all of ancient history. It's an incredibly impressive structure. Pont du Gard, built 2,000 years ago, is phenomenal, but it's a little bit hard to reach. Where is it? It's in the south of France near Marseille, Nice, and Avignon and Nimes, roughly between Nimes and Avignon. It's worth finding. Recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Not only is this a work of great engineering, but it has come down to us as one of the most important works of art of the ancient world, a work of great architecture. It's the tallest ancient bridge and the second highest structure the Romans ever built, after the Colosseum in Rome, which is just 6 feet higher. One of the greatest sights in all of ancient history is the Roman aqueduct of Pont du Gard. You can see behind me this incredibly impressive structure. In fact, it's the tallest bridge that the Romans ever built. It's a bridge for water. It's a water aqueduct that's spanning the river. Now, this is a long aqueduct. Occasionally, the aqueduct would come upon a river valley, as you see here, and it had to cross the river on a tall bridge. The reason for that is that the water aqueduct had to maintain a pretty level flow of water. The water would only drop about 1 inch every 300 feet, and therefore the water couldn't go down the side of a valley and then up the other side. It just wasn't practical. Incredible Roman engineers built a bridge, as you see, the Pont du Gard. It's about 2,000 years old, and it's the second highest structure that the Romans ever built, after the Colosseum in Rome, which is just about 6 feet higher than this structure. There's 3 levels of arches, and the large arches on the bottom are the largest arches that the Roman engineers ever built. Remarkable structure. The paved path from the visitor center affords some decent views, but don't settle for only this. Stroll up to the bridge and you can go on a well-marked hillside path to gain access to look at the aqueduct's upper level. Coming all this way to Pont du Gard, you want to fully enjoy the various vistas for a complete appreciation. It was built in the middle of the 1st century by the ancient Romans, and it is about 1,000 feet long and over 150 feet high. It's a remarkable bridge, and of course the reason they had to construct this enormous building was to get the water from one side of this valley to the other. It was water coming from a distant spring that was heading for the city of Nimes. And of course, in ancient days, they didn't have pressurized water pipes that could go down a slope and then back up a slope. Their water channel had to be pretty level. Now, we were very fortunate on this visit that the canal itself was open, which is most unusual. Generally, when you're visiting the Pont du Gard, you're not allowed to walk through the channel, but in this day, it was open, so we walked through, and here's what it looked like inside. Partly open and partly covered, forming a dark tunnel that tall folks will need to stoop to get through. In the ancient times, it was completely covered over to protect the water. Now here you're going to acquire first-hand respect for the amazing engineering skill that created this marvel. The interior surface of the water channel was not only held together with mortar joints, but it was covered with a special stucco that was composed in part of shards of pottery and tile, and then it was covered with an olive oil surface, and this made sure that it was very smooth and slippery so that the water could easily flow. During its hundreds of years of use, the aqueduct had to be carefully maintained by the ancient Romans because things would grow, plants and calcite accretions would grow on the inside of the limestone channel, and so constant maintenance was necessary to scrape it off and keep the water flowing. And because the water had to travel 31 miles from its source to destination, they estimate that it took about 27 hours for the water to flow along that entire course. A few of the sections of the aqueduct are tunneled, drilled right through solid rock. You can actually see some of that tunneling right next to the aqueduct bridge itself, and it's a pathway that you can walk through. It's really quite dramatic. A lot of the rest of the length of this aqueduct was built underground, which was generally constructed by digging a trench and then lining that with stones and covering it with stone slabs and then covering that over with earth. And so you have a nice underground pipe. Leaving the aqueduct behind, walk down the slope, then along the stream on the sunny side of the structure for a few hundred yards to get the best possible view looking back towards the soaring masterpiece. Perhaps you'll get lucky and have a calm day with a mirror reflection of the bridge in the river's smooth surface, as we did. This is one of the world's most astonishing ancient sites. It's a marvel that we've inherited from antiquity. The bridge construction was generally done without the use of mortar or clamps. The stones were cut so perfectly that they were held together by gravity and friction. And this was a typical Roman technique. The other similar kind of huge aqueduct is found in Segovia, Spain. And there too, it's just held together with friction and gravity. Paradoxically, a huge stone structure like this that's held together by friction and gravity can better withstand an earthquake than if it were relied on mortar to hold it together. It's a huge structure with an enormous volume of stone. It's a local limestone that was quarried from just about a quarter mile away from the bridge itself. The aqueduct bridge, of course, is part of a longer canal that stretched about 50 kilometers. That's about 30 miles. The bridge itself is 350 meters long, so it's really a small fraction of the total length of this long aqueduct bringing water in from the distant countryside into Nimes. But the Pont du Gard is certainly the centerpiece, the masterpiece of the entire long canal. Curiously, the water source in a spring and the city of Nimes are only 12 miles apart, but the aqueduct is 31 miles because it takes a winding course to match the contours of the landscape. It has to go around some foothills, so rather than going straight, it goes 3 times longer than the actual distance. Just imagine the perfection of engineering that went into creating this long canal. The actual descent in height is only 56 feet over that entire length, just over 30 miles long. So that's a gradient, they say, of only 1 in 3,000, enough to keep the water flowing at the right speed. You don't want the water to flow too fast. It'll wear away the structure, and you don't want it to go too slowly because then it stagnates. So they figured it out just perfectly. Remarkable precision from those ancient Roman engineers. You might wonder, how could they ever lift the stones so high up from the valley bottom 150 feet high in the air? And these are very big rocks. Well, not much of a problem for those ancient Roman engineers. They were very good with block and tackle, with pulleys and ropes and gears and wheels. They understood the principles of engineering construction very well. That's how they were able to build so many monuments throughout their empire. It's estimated the aqueduct carried about 44 million gallons of water a day into the town of Nimes, which was probably way more water than they needed in typical ostentatious Roman style. And that would be to supply water to their fountains and their baths and the homes of the upper class. Nimes was a great Roman center. In particular, it was a retirement area for the very successful soldiers and the generals from ancient Roman armies. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, the aqueduct was no longer carrying water over its 31-mile length, and yet the bridge remained, and one of the reasons why is it was an actual bridge across this valley, and it was used as a toll bridge. Perhaps it was best described by the writer Henry James, who visited the Pont du Gard in 1884 and commented, "The hugeness, the solidity, the unexpectedness, the monumental rectitude of the whole thing leave you nothing to say and make you stand gazing. You simply feel that it is noble and perfect, that it has the quality of greatness." Keep one eye on the clock, for you need to catch the bus to Avignon, and they don't go very late in the day. Check the schedules, but on this day the latest bus we could catch was at 1:22 p.m. and it arrived back in Avignon at 2 p.m. The next bus was much later. It was at 6:45 p.m. Otherwise, it's nice to be back in the great city of Avignon by mid-afternoon to catch up on any sites that you may have missed, do some more shopping, or take a nap to recover from your intensive visit to these many places.